I gotta wait. How long I gotta wait for a press record?
Go.
Welcome to the stand, where Miss Dreme always has a story.
I'm Dreme, a black woman with many beautiful interconnecting identities. A few I will name at this moment as we get started on this podcast journey together. A Bostonian, born and raised in the inner city, Dorchester and Roxbury neighborhoods, to a teenage single mother who has my whole heart. An educator, I've been working with youth and children since my teenage years, and formally, I have been teaching almost a decade now. That's wild to think about. An entrepreneur, I am the founder of The Chair, a black and brown centered tech platform dedicated to supporting people on their hair journey, where you can design hairboards, connect to hairstylists, and share hair care tips for a more joyous experience. I have a workable site, my prototype. It took me 2 years to build, and now I'm on this adventure that you're currently on with me. My goal for this podcast is to share stories, black stories, educator stories, entrepreneurship stories, and hair stories. I want you to leave each episode with the opportunity to gain new insight, just a glimpse into my world or the worlds that are featured on my podcasts, a little chuckle during your day or night, possibly a little anger to encourage you to advocate for justice, and hope to continue learning and dreaming. So come in and listen to the beautiful voices in the chair as they share their stories, starting with me.
Where we share stories in the chair.
Hello, beautiful people. This is Kelly. Kelly, can you please introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. I'm Kelly Corrigan. I am a friend and a fan of Dreme. I write books, mostly about different seasons of family life. I have a television show on PBS called Tell Me More, where Dreme was a guest. And I have a podcast called Kelly Corrigan Wonders that we've been doing for about 4 years now. We have hundreds of episodes.
Yes.
And we look at things in little series. So we did a series on what is well-being and how do you get it? And if you ever are able to get it, how do you keep it? We've done series on the worst advice we've ever gotten, like the kind of conventional wisdom that should be roundly questioned. We've done series on rupture and repair, meaning stories where people almost broke up or went to war and then pulled back from the edge and trying to surface the principles and practices that make repair possible. We've done series on a book you were assigned in high school that had super powerful impact on your thinking, et cetera, et cetera. So that's probably where I spend the majority of my time is podcasting, because we release 3 episodes every week. So that takes a considerable amount of mind share. And then I'm a mom. I have 2 kids, 21-year-old girl who's about to be a senior in college at UVA, and then a kid who is not quite 23, who just finished her first year of work in New York City as a banker. And I live half the year in Manhattan and half the year in Bozeman, Montana.
And Kelly and I met I was thinking about this the other day, almost like 2 years ago. And my college counselor sent me an email. Whatever Miss Gayman sends me, I'm going to read it. So Miss Gayman said, hey, there's this woman, her name is Kelly, and she's doing a series on looking at liberal arts education. And she wants to talk to people who've had that experience. Are you interested? And I was like, yeah, why not? I love talking about liberal arts education. And then that was my first time on a podcast. It was my first time going to a radio studio set up in Boston. I was talking to you over Zoom. I had all the headphones. There was the guy in the back messing with all the lights and the sounds. And I was like, wow, this is an experience. And I feel like...
Yeah, that was a really fun series.
It was such a good conversation, because I was like, I'm just going to answer questions and just chat and talk. And I felt like you were receiving what I was giving out and being able to be like, here is my liberal arts education experience. And that was, 2 days before I had to move to South Africa to complete my Fulbright.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, nice to meet you. All right, I gotta go. And then
Yeah, I got to go really far.
then 9 months later, I come back and I receive an email from you being like, hey, are you around? And I was like, yeah, what's up? And you're like, hey, I'm doing this series. Do you mind like coming to hang out with me in New York? And I was like, yeah. And I told my mom, and mom was like, what is in New York? I was like, I don't know. I'll talk to her later. And then I go, oh, this is serious. There are cameras, and there's the grandma couch and the pattern, and then there's a makeup artist, and it's cold in this building. Oh, man. All right. And there's a lot of lights. That was also, again, another first that I've never had before, being able to sit next to you and chat and be like, wow, this is the stuff that I continue to see growing up, thinking about interviews and talking and being able to share a story and what it means. And I am a Black woman with blue hair sitting next to this white woman who is asking questions, and she's caring about what I'm saying, to be able to share to anyone who's willing to listen about what it looks like to think about well-being. And so Kelly has a special place in my heart about planting seeds for me in this podcast world.
That episode was so special because we had talked for 10 episodes about how a certain blend of features in a daily life can lead to well-being, like sleep and nutrition and movement, But then we hadn't really talked about the elephant in the room, which is those kinds of behaviors and habits are hard to adopt, or there'd be nothing to talk about. And so we brought in Angela Duckworth, who had written Grit, and who is a social scientist working out of Penn. And what we wanted you and the other guest, Will McQuiston, to do was stress test all the theory against the pressures of a normal life. And we really wanted to talk to younger people because so many people in the series were, definitely over 40. And I'd say 90% of people were over 50. And so I had interviewed Will also for an earlier podcast. And then I'd interviewed you, and I thought, God, that would just be such a great conversation. It would be just such a variety of life experiences to bring to the table and sort of cross with this recommended set of behaviors and to be more honest about it. And what the yield was for me, I don't know if this is what stood out to you, but the thing I took from it is that oftentimes the message is change yourself. You got to change your behavior. You got to change your daily schedule. You got to add things and subtract things, and it's all on you and your shoulders. And what came out was there's an equally significant role of context, and that changing your context will necessarily change your behaviors. Like in a really simplistic example, if you live in the North Pole, you're probably not going to go for a walk every day because it's too cold. And if you live in the swamps of Florida, you might not go for a walk every day either because it's too hot. If you live next to people that go running every day, it might suddenly occur to you, maybe I'll start running. If your mother cooks great meals every day, it's going to be a lot easier for you to eat a well-balanced diet. If your whole house goes to sleep at 10 o'clock, it's going to be really easy for you to go to sleep at 10 o'clock. If you live in a dorm with 1,000 other kids and it's noisy until 1 a.m., it's going to be almost impossible to go to bed at 10 o'clock. So we really dug into how context influences the behaviors we're most easily able to adopt and how those behaviors change outcomes. So I just loved the way that turned out. And if people want to watch it or listen to it, they can just Google Kelly Corrigan, Dreme Flint, and it'll come right up.
This is true. I did that. One of my friends from grad school at UCLA hit me up over text. She's like, hey, I Googled your name and you're on TV. And I was like, oh, okay.
There we go.
And so she was like, can you tell me how? And I thought it was a really cool moment to be like, wow, that's cool. But thinking about this idea of context, there's something I've been asking my white friends and white professors and white educators that have been on my podcast, and really thinking about race all the time. I thought about it growing up. It has been pushed on me to think about it, and a majority white spaces. But when was the first time you thought about your whiteness?
I mean, my family didn't watch that much television. There wasn't that much television to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were 3 channels. It was pre-cable. And, it was just some shows on each night after the news. But one show that everyone in my family watched together was All in the Family, which is the great Norman Lear's first sitcom. And then that spun off a show called The Jeffersons. So All in the Family, the main character is Archie Bunker, and he's a total bigot. And he says the most outrageous things. He vocalizes like every horrible thing about every minority group you can imagine.
Mm.
And he's kind of an equal opportunity bigot. He thinks they're all bad. And so he thinks his daughter, for instance, is like a nincompoop. And her daughter's with a Jewish guy. And he says horrible things about Jewish people. And then his next door neighbors are the Jeffersons, who is Black family. And so when we watched a family, what we were doing was watching somebody who was totally wrong. He was positioned as like the biggest dummy on the show. The thing we're actually laughing at is what an ass this main character is. And so I thought about that when you asked that question. And then we all loved the Jeffersons. So it spun off its own sitcom called The Jeffersons about this family. I feel like everyone in America loved that show. And, it was a time, as I was saying in the setup, that there were like 5 shows. And then I'm from Philly, outside of Philadelphia. And there was I had this great woman in my homeroom, like all K through 12, named Wilma Branch. And she was just absolutely beautiful Black woman, so sophisticated. I think she modeled in high school, or at least that's the story we made up about her, that she was just so stunning.
Mm.
And I was aware that high school was not great for her. And I was aware of different team makeups. So Radnor High School was a very sporty place, and everybody went to watch everything. We watched football, we watched basketball, we watched lacrosse and baseball and soccer. Mm. And a lot of people played on the teams. There were a lot of teams. Like in one high school, there would be a freshman team, a junior varsity, and a senior team, and a varsity team. So that's a lot of kids were playing sports. And when you went to soccer, all the kids were white, and you went to basketball, all the kids were Black. And when you went to baseball, it was mixed. So I was noticing that. And then right before I graduated senior year, it was those bombings in Philadelphia on that group called MOVE. And I remember that it took over the news, and it was visually horrifying. In fact, I recently saw a picture of a bomb that Israel dropped on somewhere in Yemen, I think. And the billowing clouds totally reminded me of that news coverage, because the police bombed this block in Philadelphia to get these people out, and they ended up killing, I think, like 11 people, including children. So it was a huge moment where our proximity to Philadelphia totally pierced the bubble that we lived in. And then also, Bill Cosby was a huge Philly person. And so we grew up with the Cosby Show that had the cartoons elements to it. And then, of course, everyone in America watched the Cosby Show, the sitcom. So there was sort of that blend of things. I feel like all the great music I loved, like I had all the early Michael Jackson albums. I was aware of, I was just totally drawn to that music, as everyone else seemed to be. So those are some moments, but sitting next to Wilma Branch in homeroom was meaningful, because, and I think it might have been meaningful in 2 ways. One is that, when you're in middle school and high school, it's such a horrible time of vanity for me and for many girls that I'm aware of, where you're just constantly looking at yourself in the mirror, and you're trying different hairdos, and you're doing different stuff with curling irons and hairspray, and you're just trying so hard to be attractive. And then this woman was so effortlessly beautiful, which of course you in an immature mind thinks, well, that must mean that you have no problems. And then to know and understand that she wasn't quite fitting in with the Black kids, and she wasn't quite fitting in with the white kids, and she wasn't enough of anything for either, was a new layer of understanding to me. Just as if there had been a really handsome guy who was the captain of the lacrosse team, who you found out didn't feel comfortable in our high school, didn't feel comfortable in the halls of Radnor High School. So those are some early impressions I had about race.
Where we share stories in the chair.
Look, it's my commercial. We will be right back.
It's more than just a bad hair day. It's a journey. Finding the right hairstyle isn't easy, nor is finding the right stylist or the right products. Looking in every corner of the web gets messy, overwhelming, and exhausting. All the ads, the articles, the products, the videos, it shouldn't be this hard, but it is. And now, it isn't. The Chair. A black and brown centered platform where you can design hairboards, connect to hairstylists, and share hair care tips for a new, joyful path on your hair journey. Avoid the clutter, save yourself hours, months, and even years of research and poor trial and error. Everything you need and only what you need is in one place. Hairboards made by people like you, for you. Find the right products, the right people, the right answers for you, stress-free. Join the Chair community and make every day a great hair day. When you share your pain, you allow others to help you. And when you share your success, you help others get theirs. Lean on the Chair. We got you. No stress, no strife. In the chair, the chair, the chair. All right.
I had a class in college called Quantitative Methods. It was like a requirement course for my anthropology sociology major. And I had a white professor, shout out to Professor Beer. He took his quantitative class and purposely made it all about race. But he did it while we looked at these theories and be able to talk through them and think about it in terms of data. So the theory that I remember the most was called inner contact theory. And the whole point of inner contact theory was just saying, like, when you are in spaces with different types of people, you will naturally start to question. And sometimes getting into those spaces, it starts as something that's common. So a common sport, maybe a knitting group, things of that nature. So we have this inner contact theory, and then you're able to start to slowly ask questions and think, what about this? So like I worked at this overnight camp in the middle of New Hampshire, and people were like, well, you're surrounded by white people. And I'm like, yes, I was. But it was also the whole point of the camp was to bring kids from the city into the woods. So you had kids from Newark, New Jersey. You had kids from Brooklyn and the Bronx. You had kids from Boston, Mass. You had kids from Vermont, Keene, New Hampshire, Maine. You had all types of kids here. Then it was also, they had this scale in terms of wealth. So you had kids who paid full tuition, and you had kids who were on scholarships. You also had kids who were coming from different programs. So we had foster kids, home for little wanderers. We had all types of kids. And the only thing they would put on the slip, when I became a staff, I learned this. You had a slip, and they would put the name of the kid, the school that they came from, and they would put their race. It was optional. And then whether or not they were flagged. Flagged could be anything from like in the bed to like they were moved from foster care 5 times. You never really knew what the flag was until someone called. And then from there, it was up to the staff to mix them into groups. So we had 66 girls, 6 cabins, and it was supposed to be around 10 or 11-ish per cabin. It is your job with this list that you possibly don't know if they're a returner or not returner. You don't know what they are racially to put them together. So you had kids from Keene, New Hampshire, Newark, New Jersey put together in the same cabin from ages 11 to 16. I will always remember the first time white kids met black kids, white kids met Dominican kids for the first time. And it was just like always these moments of they would start off stressed because they're away from home, but then they would slowly be able to be like, this is my best friend, by the end of the 16 days, right? It was 16 days overnight camp, so they couldn't go anywhere. Now the race became, oh, this is a secondary conversation. But then there were these moments in between the day where it's like, I'm yelling at my white kids to reapply sunscreen more often than my black kids. So my white kids are like, Miss, I don't want to do it. And I'm like, please. And my black kids are like, no, I don't need to do it. I'm like, that's a lie. You also need to do it. So now we're having these conversations where my black kids would come with braids and my white kids would be like, why does their hair look like that? So then we're naturally having these organic conversations. They put them in this space to be able to have that chance, right? And the same thing with the staff. There was a lot of us staff that were getting to know each other for the first time, right? We had people from overseas who've never had a camp before in their life. And they're like, oh, I applied to do this job because I thought it would be like the magic school bus. And I was like, who told you that? And they would take pictures in front of the school bus because that was the goal for them. And so it was these moments of understanding and learning.
Yes, but it was all kind of casual. It was in the context of something larger rather than really pointed program where it's like, let's all get to know each other, tell each other about our heritage. The point was to have a great summer camp experience.
Yes.
And if in the unfolding of that, you happen to let go of some assumptions about a certain kind of person who looks a certain kind of way, all the better. But I do think that there's something lost because we didn't succeed at desegregation. My husband went to Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, which is sort of famous because the president sent in the National Guard to desegregate the school. And there were only these 9 black kids that were willing to go to this gigantic high school with 2,000 white kids. And then the governor, I think his name's Orville Faubus or something outrageously Southern like that, said, oh, we're not going to do it. We don't want to desegregate. And then the president said, okay, well, I'm in charge and you're going to. And if you're worried about safety, which was like the ostensible superficial reason why he was pushing back, which the underlying reason was just pure racism. If you're worried about safety, then we'll give each kid a 101st Airborne Marine. And the Marine will walk with them to every single class for an entire year, just to make sure that they aren't harmed. And so the only place these 4 girls of the Little Rock 9 could go where their 101st Airborne could not follow them was into the bathroom. And so they'd go in the bathroom and they'd have girls like picking at them and throwing lit pieces of paper over the bathroom stall to try to light their hair on fire, like really crazy. And so then the girl said, well, then we just stopped drinking liquids until after school. So we just literally didn't have any water to drink all day long in Arkansas until after school so that they never had to be out of the sight of their 101st Airborne Marine. And then, but Edward, my husband, loved Central High School. He loved it. And whenever this topic comes up, he's always saying what a great model it was because everyone did better together than they do better apart. Any kid you measure was doing better at Central than they would have done in some other school where it was completely racially segregated.
Oh, and if you're interested to learn more about my experiences as a Black woman and educator in Guangzhou, China, I wrote my first ebook titled Nowhere and Everywhere, Captured Emotions of a Beautifully Broken Love Story. It is on lulu.com. Take a read and see some beautiful photography of mine. Enjoy the rest of the show.
I believe that also there was a time where lots of different kinds of people lived on the same street. In fact, that's exactly what they were portraying in All in the Family, is that Archie Bunker's one neighbor was Jewish and the other neighbor was Black, and they all had to be there together, and they all had to live together. And Edith, the wife, is this like sweet kind of nincompoop who's always inviting people over. It would never occur to her not to invite the Black family next door to come over for a slice of cake and a cup of tea, and hilarity ensued because the main character was so behind the times. It was such a fool to be making a big deal out of this. The contact theory makes so much sense to me, and exposure theory makes so much sense to me. And I don't live in very many mixed spaces right now. I love being on a New York City subway, and when I'm in New York, I take them every day here and there. And I think this is fascinating. There's probably 12 different countries represented in this subway car. The range of incomes in this subway car is probably from like $5 million a year to $1 a year. In this subway car, we are touching each other.
I feel like there is an idealism there in terms of when I think about
It could be.
When I think about integration, I also spend a lot of time thinking about love, and I spend a lot of time thinking about the why. I was one of 5 Black kids at my private, predominantly white high school. And I think about the reason why we were there. Yeah, was I considered the intercontact theory. They understood a version of Blackness. Yes, but then I like Dreme's Blackness, not the other Blackness. So now we're creating a separation. Now we're creating these caste systems of race through this type. There is still a level of elitism. There's still this conversation of, well, we can handle this type of difference. We can't handle XX difference. We don't fully see this difference as human, as real. I remember coming home from my first few days at my private school and being like, Mommy, our home life is not considered normal. And my mom would ask, what is normal? And I'm like, I grew up in a single parent home. So I grew up with my mother, and a lot of the white kids came from 2-parent homes, but there were a lot of them that were divorced. So they had double the amount of families, or they were being raised by their nannies. And I was like, what is this? And they were like, no, my life is good. Like, my life is better than your life. So it became a lot of these different comparisons about what normal is. But because there was more of them, and because they didn't have a lot of people that look like me in these spaces, then now I'm questioning the validity of my life because it's not the same. And then adding race to it just complicates it. But for you worked in spaces of nonprofit, and you volunteered, and you've been international. Do you feel like at those moments you put yourself in spaces of difference, and that you learned to just be better? You learned to see yourself differently?
When I was abroad, it was the first time I realized that I was an American, and what that meant to people, and what their assumptions were upon meeting me, and how negative a lot of those assumptions were. So I was traveling for the entire year of 1992, which was the year that Clinton was elected. And so everybody in all the hostels where we stayed wanted to talk about the presidential election. And their assumptions upon meeting us is that they would know more about American foreign policy than we did. They would know more about American history, presidential history, than we would. And that we would know almost nothing about the countries where they came from. And guess what? They were right. They did know more. They knew more about us, and we didn't know that much about them. And I had not been confronted with that truth yet. And it's one of the top 5 reasons why I wish that travel were something that more people could do, because it is such a shift in your mindset. It's such an eye-opening experience, mostly about your own areas of ignorance and deficiency.
Well, Kelly, thank you so much for sharing your stories in the chair. I truly appreciate
My pleasure.
I truly
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Yeah, anytime. I'll talk to you whenever you want.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories in the chair. It means the most.
Good luck with it. It's cool. It's really cool. I'm proud of you.
Welcome to the chair, where Miss Dreme always has a story.
Thank you for listening to an episode of The Chair. I, of course, would love your continued support. Let me know what you think of this episode by doing all the things. Subscribe, comment, and come back next week, every week. Enjoy the rest of your beautiful day. Or if you are like me, enjoy that moonlight and that one star under all your city lights. Love you. Talk to you later.
the chair.
Well, I gotta wait. How long I gotta wait for a press record?
Go.
We support her. Shit.
Do your.
Welcome to the chair, where Miss Dreme always has a story.